How's it going, everybody? Happy Wednesday, happy hump day for all of you out there in the working week. I'm Rob Fishbeck. I'm one half of your host for this evening. The other half to my right or to your left, depending upon how you're looking at the screen, is my good buddy Delacommon. We're actually back for once. We've been trying to do this show for 3 weeks now. I was sick. I was down for the count. Like, I thought I was going to have to call an ambulance. And then you were out last week. So here we are, week 3. We're finally getting it done. How you doing? What's going on?
I am still battling mine, as you can tell by my voice, and it's it's been very weird season. It hasn't really felt like Christmas. We had like one day of snow, and then just everything else has just kind of felt like it's approached closer and closer. And yeah, we figured, especially with the end of the year coming up, we should finally get to this episode that we've been talking about, probably behind the scenes for over 6 months, and we finally were able to. I believe I text you and said, damn it, unless I have no voice whatsoever, we are getting this episode done, because it's a good subject and it's one of our favorite topics that we discuss all the time, like, just in our regular conversing.
It's a great combination for me. It's the best of both worlds. Those of you that know me from Characters of Culture, another show here on the RFN, where we talk about movies and television, the documentary aspect, it's right up my alley. I love documentaries, especially ones on musicians, obviously. So I'm really excited about tonight. Before we get going, though, we were talking a little bit behind the scenes. There's so many great music documentaries out there. There's so many of them, and especially in the streaming era, thanks to like Netflix and like YouTube even. And again, we're sticking with, for lack of a better word, professional documentaries tonight, because there's so many great documentaries and video essays that are on YouTube that I can't recommend enough to people. But we're sticking more with we'll just use the word professional documentary. That's not a knock against YouTubers at all whatsoever. We are YouTubers ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So I say that to say, there's definitely a few that didn't quite make our list. We were trying to keep it to like 5 or 6 a piece. And, right out of the gate, there's one that sticks out for me that's not on either one of our lists that I definitely want to mention. And that is the Muscle Shoals documentary. Absolutely phenomenal. Fame Recording Studio, for those of you that aren't familiar with that. Everybody's heard the song Sweet Home Alabama by Leonard Skinner. They use that. There's that line, Muscle Shoals has got the Swampers. That they're talking about the Muscle Shoals rhythm section down there in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And then for me, another documentary that didn't quite make the list that I cannot recommend enough is 20 Feet from Stardom. I've seen that one 3 or 4 times. It's so beautiful. It's about backup singers and kind of the history, starting more with like the Phil Spector era and all that sort of stuff, and like going through all the way to today, and kind of the life and legacy that backup singers and background singers, they've kind of always gotten the short end of the stick. But here's the deal: Gimme Shelter would be still a great song, but because of Mary Clayton, that song goes to a whole nother peak that it never would have gotten to otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, this also list is more tailored to our favorites, even though it says greatest. Right. I mean, it's still subjective on that one. That was pretty funny. Like, I put favorites in the other promotional stuff, and you put greatest, and I'm like, well, let's play 50-50 on that one.
You gotta play the game as a YouTuber, and I feel more people will click on greatest than they will favorite. So
yeah. So also, like, if we were talking about documentaries that we should mention up top that are not, we're not going to delve into, but are worth mentioning, not just because of, like you mentioned too, Searching for Sugarman is a huge documentary for most people, for music documentary. Some Kind of Monster, the Metallica one, I believe I have seen it once. It was trash. It's one of the fakest documentaries you will ever see in your life. Like, it's
really
staged. My buddy Ben and I go, like, our hatred of it is almost as much as our hatred of one of your picks.
Is it one of those? Is it one of those documents? So, like, for example, and it didn't make the list because it is so new. Jason Isbell had a great documentary that came out this year through HBO called Running with Our Eyes Closed, and it's about the making of 2 records ago, Reunions. And he makes a comment when they were interviewing him for the documentary, and he said that he's like, there's 2 types of, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, there's 2 types of music documentaries, the bad ones or whatever, and then the ones that are like warts and all, and those are the ones that he's more gravitated towards. Same, I think, with me, and same with you. Is the Metallica one just kind of like they didn't want to, like, it's like squeaky clean sort of thing?
No, it just seems like a lot of it's stage and a lot of the conflict is because, like, right
Oh,
now,
sure,
and
sure.
before we get into the meat and potatoes of the list, this is important to bring up is especially in the streaming age, there's a lot of documentaries that are faux documentaries, and all they are is promotional material.
Mhm.
Taylor Swift, Kanye West,
Yes.
Drake probably has one. Like those, I'm not counting. The only one that didn't get mentioned in here, even though I don't think it follows that same category, is Beyonce's Homecoming. I think that's
Okay.
something different, even though that's more of a concert film and it kind of does stuff. But there is this weird subgenre that's happened, especially in the streaming services, where you have these self-serving, fucking terrible ass documentaries that are interesting. And it's kind of spawned from like the '90s, like the late '90s, where you had like pop stars
Hmm.
follow Britney Spears around for a day. Like there was that type of thing,
Yeah.
and now it's kind of transcended into the new era. We're not talking about those.
I mean,
Another one I
yeah,
want to. Another one, real quick. Just I want to
yeah.
mention Amy Winehouse documentary is fantastic. It didn't make my list, but
I've
I
not seen
felt it
it.
was worth mentioning. You really appreciate like
Yeah.
that woman was an artist, like
Sure. Sure.
amazing. Just and so it kind of sucks that she kind of got pigeonholed, and then you have the whole tragic story of what Amy
Right.
Winehouse ended up becoming. So
And
those are the ones I just want to throw out there
yeah,
because I
totally.
know
And
most people are really like if they are when they look and they're like, well, what the hell? You're not talking about Some Kind of Monster or Searching for Sugarman because I mean that one was huge.
I'm just not like, again, I know about 5 of their songs. I'm just not a big Metallica fan. So like that's for me, it's just, that's why I never saw it. I will say this as a side note, and there's nothing wrong with I love this, for example. Um, when an artist or a group or somebody will release maybe like a 15-20 minute like behind the scenes doc on like the making of an album. Like I love that sort of stuff. But again, to your point, it's promotional material.
Yeah,
There's a big difference between like a retrospective career or even like did you ever watch that VH1 series from like the early 2000s called classic albums? And they did like Damn
yeah,
the Torpedoes, Dark Side of the Moon, Rumors, like when they like sit kind of behind the mixing board and go, hey, this is
yeah,
how we cut this together, like that. I mean, I would almost say still like that's a different thing. But I've no problem. There's a great Tom Petty one on his blues record Mojo, and it's like 15 minutes long, and it's just like behind the scenes. That's all cool, but that's not what we're covering tonight. So to go off your point, yeah, no, and definitely
yeah,
like the new Taylor Swift docs and stuff. That's just to sell. That's just
yeah,
to sell. That's to sell Taylor Swift as a figure, so people will buy her merchandise and go to her concerts.
yeah.
So
And also shout out to the OG. It was mentioned in here behind the music, the OG documentary series that that's when I first learned what a fucking train wreck Fleetwood Mac was.
like
That's like the Hall
same,
of Fame
same.
documentary, TV documentary of it. So, all right, so you're gonna kick it off with your first one. What do
Yeah,
you
so
got?
we're gonna kick it off with a joint. This isn't a Spike Lee joint. This is an
Yeah,
RFN joint, but this is a joint for us. Delicom said it's been a few years since he's seen the documentary. I actually just rewatched it this summer for the first time in like 10 years. And I before I play the quick little clip, I will say this: I've never done hard drugs in my entire life, ever, and I never plan on it. But after watching this documentary like 3 or 4 times in a year's time period when it first came out in 2010, I turned to one of my best friends and I was like, I've never wanted to try hard drugs more after watching this documentary. And here we go.
wrong lesson. Very much the wrong lesson.
Yeah, so it is none other than Stones in Exile, kind of the backstory, and then their making of what I consider to be my top 3 favorite albums. They're all three of my favorite albums are number one. My top three favorite albums of all time: Exile on Main Street, came out in 1972. It's phenomenal. I can't recommend the documentary enough. It just it shows it what I love about the Rolling Stones, and it's kind of a through line with pretty much everything that I'm covering tonight on my end. What I love about the Rolling Stones, though, is just kind of how they've always been honest and open about things. Like they're not bashful about talking about the excess, like the drugs and the women and the
I
hotel
mean,
room.
they're the template for a rock and roll band. They are the template, and they weren't the template by kind of formula. It was just what they were. So I mean, like you said, we extensively talked about, once again, if you've not checked out, fantastic episode where Rob and I discuss Exile on Main Street. It is both of ours probably in top five, in our top fives respectively. And I'm saying with you, like one changes no matter
Totally
what day it is.
And you can't discount Sticky Fingers. I mean, they're just
that's
so neck and neck, you know.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So what was I about ready to say? But yeah, so they're very much not bashful. And then you and I talk about how this is our favorite, period of the Stones, like this whole era.
The Jimmy Miller era. Yeah, when he was producing.
Yeah, like where it was just everything could fall apart, and at times did. And so, but it's still one of, like, and the thing with like Rolling Stones, there's so many great docs about them. Like we talked about this in our concert films one about Shine a Light.
Yeah. Give Me Shelter.
Like we talked about Give Me Shelter. Like we talked about all of this. So, but yeah, I don't fully remember this. Like once again, head cold. Fog is happening. But I do remember like just being riveted by like that whole story of like how one of our favorite albums came to be. And yeah.
And for me, what it boils down to, what I really took away from that documentary, despite my joke about hard drugs, is that, again, this is a period in which they're all doing hard drugs. Keith's doing heroin, amongst other things, right? All of them are drinking.
I had to find it.
Hey, dude, honestly, and not only is it one of the greatest albums of all time, I think in 2024 we should do a show on the greatest album covers of all time, because that's definitely one of the greatest album covers. See, you just got excited. I'm excited for next year already. But anyways, to wrap up my point, being that the fact that they were exiled from England due to taxes, they were living in France in this beautiful home, which, they're fucking up with the drugs and the whole thing. They got this mobile recording studio. They got the drums in one hallway and the bass amps in another end of the hallway. And like through all of that, through all of their trials and tribulations, and like they were really, like, at this stage of the game, they were really afraid they were going to wind up in prison. And I think Keith was trying to beat like a drug arrest and like all this stuff. There's so much going on. And like through all that chaos came this record that really, to me, is maybe the best representation. It's strange enough, they're a British band, but to me, maybe the best representation of American music put in a blender, because you have things that are Sweet Virginia comes to mind. That's very much a country song. And then you've got, they even cover Robert Johnson, Stop Breaking Down on the record. So it really incorporates the blues. And then, the essence and energy and really what it means to be a rock and roll band and make a rock and roll record. To see that come out of all of that it's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's a reason why this is a joint one for both of us. Like, because I knew you were going to have it on your list, and I was like, so I didn't originally put it on my list. And then when we were talking, I was like, no, this is a joint one. This is one that we both co-sign on, like, especially with. And yeah, I mean, the Stones, we go on and on and on about the Stones, like
all day
on this channel, in a private conversations and everything else. So
our last show is about the Beatles and the Stones, of course. Okay,
very much so.
We'll move on. I'm going to move on to one of my other picks, because I had a few more than Delacommon did. But I think this is another good one to bring up. This one, I'll never forget. The backstory to this is I read in Rolling Stone magazine back when Rolling Stone magazine was still somewhat relevant, that Martin Scorsese was working on a Bob Dylan documentary, and it was like the perfect culmination. I was 14. I had just gotten into Scorsese, maybe like a year or two earlier. Like The Aviator had recently just come out. So like I'm really into Scorsese, and I had just gotten into Bob Dylan 2 years earlier. I heard Like a Rolling Stone for the first time, and it changed my life. So when this, I'll play the clip. Yeah. So when this documentary came out, I will never forget this as long as I live. This is back when, well, I think they still do. DVDs would come out on Tuesdays. So my mom worked on Tuesdays, and I remember like left her a note and everything. She was gonna pick up the DVD at Best Buy on her way home from work, and I just was sitting at home waiting. It was like 7:30 at night, rolling around for her to come home with this DVD, the Holy Grail, if it be. And I watched it's 2 discs. So I watched the first part that night, and then the second part the next day when I got home from school. And I was just like, if you can imagine me sitting in a leather recliner watching, this is the old box TVs, just smiling ear to ear, because Bob's involved in this. And that's kind of what I want to get to with this whole documentary is that, Bob Dylan, at least in the last 20 years or so, there's that 60 Minutes interview that he did like almost 20 years ago, but there's not much. Bob doesn't really do interviews or anything like that. He's kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio, unless Leonardo DiCaprio is like Oscar campaigning. There's no interviews of him. And with Bob, to have him tell you his version or his life or whatever it is, because the documentary really just kind of goes up through the motorcycle accident in '68. So kind of the first era of Bob Dylan, if you will, in the '60s, and it's so great. And I got to learn got to know a little bit Joan Baez in the documentary, and like how much of an integral figure she was just in his life. And all the other kind of people that hung around Bob at the time. And it's so beautiful and it's so great. And I can't recommend it enough. And especially both of us coming from the Midwest, I really connected with the first half hour or so. Like he made a comment about his dad, and he had said, he's like, I think my dad just thought, the whole world was Duluth. Like there wasn't anything outside of that. And I really connected with that. I don't know about you, hailing from Indiana,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I mean, and also like Dylan's also like a fascinating creature to like, because even with this documentary, you're kind of like, how much of it is really real? Because Bob is notorious, especially in his earlier part of his career, of kind of making himself into the new American Woody Guthrie, and like making almost like a folk hero type Johnny Appleseed type character in the American like population, like in the consciousness of America. And it's still a lot of that stuff grabs hold today. But that's why I was always fascinated when you saw, what was the movie that Kate Blanchett's in where she plays Bob Dylan?
Oh, I'm Not There.
Yeah, I'm Not There. Yeah, like so that was what was also kind of fascinating like that. So it is nice that you actually have input from Bob Dylan, because to me, like you said, growing up, he was always this character that was always there, but you never saw. Like I thought it was crazy when he performed, what was it, the Oscars or the Grammy, and they had the soy bomb, like that whole incident back in the day. Like, and even then he was like legendary mythos. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think I may have seen this, but I don't think I've seen it all the way through. So I may have to go back and watch it, because I'm like you, I'm a huge Dylan mark. Like I will.
I mean, like,
one of the few people that you hear about growing up, and then when you finally listen, you're like, oh, people aren't full of shit. Like he's actually as good as advertised, if not better.
I kid you not. Like one of my best friends, he kind of claims that I got him to love music. He always liked music, but I got him to love music. And I'll never forget, this was about 10 years ago or so. I was on a Dylan kick, so he got to hear some of it. He called me on his way home from work, and he was quoting Blowing in the Wind. And he's just like, Rob, holy shit. Oh, and because he heard it for the first time. You know what I mean? And it's like, especially I think because we'd have been like 21 at the time. So I think, even being, a little bit older and a little wiser, like could you imagine, like, I'd love to go back and hear those songs for the first time. Like, how cool is that? And I also want to say that's like, we'll see what happens. I'm really excited about it. But I was just reading an article yesterday. So Bob, I call him Bob. Most people just call him Dylan. Bob. I stole that from the Big Lebowski. Bob he's been hanging out with Timothy Chalamet. And he's really been involved in. So Timothy Chalamet is going to play Bob Dylan in a movie that's supposed to come out next year. And I just read an article yesterday that Dylan's manager gave Timothy Chalamet 12 hours of unreleased like demos and bootlegs and live recordings of Bob Dylan's work throughout his career that nobody's ever heard. And it's
that
like,
punk ass kid doesn't deserve that. We deserve that.
Here's the deal. The more Timothy Chalamet films I watch, the more I'm just like, he's our next Daniel Day-Lewis. Like, he's so fucking good. But yes.
I know your former co-host does not agree. Not your former, but your other.
Lego? Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, I was gonna say not former because
Former,
Lego's
yeah.
very much your co-host on Character
That'll
Culture.
be a big announcement.
Yeah. She secretly runs the RFN. Let's
secretly, yes.
Not lie. So, yeah, great documentary. Great choice. I think we should, because we're already almost at the 22-minute mark. We've gotten just two. So, I'm gonna kick off mine with a documentary that I think kind of got lost in the shuffle because, when David Bowie passed away, there's a flood of like Bowie documentaries. There's the last 5 years, Moon Age Daydream, all this one. But this one I kind of caught on Showtime, and it's very fantastic. And it is David Bowie's 5 years. And what I love about this documentary is because instead of like trying to, like when you have somebody like Bowie or Dylan or Springsteen, you really can't condense if you're going to do like an hour or two documentary into one. I mean, as one of the examples that we will, one of them that is obviously on this list later on down the line, you can't do that. So what this one did, a fascinating documentary did, was take the like just 5 years, kind of a play off the David Bowie song 5 years, and kind of encapsulated like the key 5 years in his career, because you saw, and it's a documentary about the evolution. So you have the Ziggy Stardust years, then you have his kind of soul, like white soul thing, not quite White Duke, that is covered. But
Are you talking about that? Are you talking about that album? I'm blanking on the album title, but the
Young Americans.
Yeah. Are you talking about that one when he covers the Springsteen track? Okay.
Yeah, and actually, it's not just that. Like, you find out that like Luther Vandross is a backup singer.
Right.
You find out Niles Rodgers was huge when it comes to Bowie's like stuff that I probably knew but really hadn't really absorbed. My favorite section of it is the Berlin years. That to me is the best Bowie stuff that it doesn't get talked about as much, even though Heroes is
that time period when Heroes came out, like the late 70s?
Yeah, like Low. I'm trying to think of like off the top of my head what all those albums.
Heroes is my favorite Bowie song.
It's when him and Iggy Pop decided they were going to get sober, and they just decided they were going to move to Germany.
Did Iggy Pop do the Passenger or the Lust for Life record during that time period?
Yeah, I mean that's around that period where they were roommates, and he was kind of.
They were doing their best material, I think. Then,
especially I mean, it's also like with Lou Reed and that like Bowie had more of an influence on their solo stuff than they ever did on their solo stuff.
Right.
So, but the best takeaway is the story, and I believe I mentioned it on here before. It actually comes from this documentary. Is I absolutely love the story of how the song Heroes came about, especially lyrically. So Tony,
I don't know the story. Tell the story.
So let me pull up the lyrics real quick, just so
Yeah.
I can
I
make
mean,
sure
like,
that I'm
and
referencing
while
correct.
Delacon's pulling this up, like, I can't say this enough. Like, I love David Bowie. David Bowie's
Yeah.
he's great. And what I love about him, amongst other artists as well, is he was a chameleon, similar to Dylan. Like, he went through very distinct and different. I mean, like, there couldn't be more of a difference between like Starman and Rebel Rebel. Those are two totally different songs.
Or if you listen to
Um,
like the first album, like All You Pretty Things, and then you know, Queen Bitch, even those on the same album don't even remotely sound.
no, no.
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
But
but
no,
that's
but my point is like for me, Heroes. I'll be honest. The first time I heard it was one of those 9/11 tribute shows when he played it then, and I was just like blown away and was like, "This is phenomenal. This is a phenomenal song." You know, and it's always been my favorite David Bowie song. But go ahead, tell the people the story.
so the way it goes about it is when they were writing Heroes, David Bowie happened to kind of glance at Tony out and about over by the Berlin Wall, and he was being very romantic with somebody he was with. I don't know if it was a girlfriend, mistress, whatever, but Bowie loved the stark imagery of this young couple in love strolling through, and the backdrop is the Berlin Wall, something that's oppressive, something that is supposed to be of our worst tendencies as human beings, and it's juxtaposed with this beautiful scene of him just being just kind of in love with this woman walking alongside the Berlin Wall. And verse 4 of it, it says, "I can remember standing by the wall and the gun shops above our heads, and we kissed as though nothing could fall." So hearing that story, like, just kind of brought home, like, this is something I haven't heard when it comes to Bowie. Bowie's mastership, like, Bowie's one of those few guys that's like in pop history that is a pop star, a rock star, and an actual artist, not just a commercialized thing. And so I love this documentary. I first saw it on Showtime. I think you may be able to watch it on Apple Plus or Amazon Prime. I'm not sure. Now that I got done doing my little talk about that, I really want to watch it again. But it is very fascinating when it talks about like the different periods of Bowie, because he really did go through that transformative change. Like, my favorite was when I was growing up, I had friends who were not huge Bowie fans. Like, they knew of Bowie, but they really didn't listen to him until he started doing stuff with Trent Reznor, like I'm Afraid of Americans era, when he was doing his
Oh,
industrial type thing.
he kind of went into that like Tom Waits pocket of sonic music there for a little while, where it was very industrial kind of
Yeah,
vibe.
like he pretty much, Little Wonder is my favorite example of this. My favorite, if you ever listen to the song Little Wonder, is it sounds like the first part is what David Bowie thinks an industrial song sounds like. It's very kind of hokey. Then the last part is when Trent Reznor comes in, and then you're like,
Yeah.
it's almost like he was shown how it actually is done, and it's a weird, like, it's a good song, but it's very weird sonically, because you could hear, like, okay, you may be the master of all this other stuff. Let's Trent Reznor, let me take this over on this part. So,
I
but
gotta
yeah,
watch this
5 years,
documentary. I'm really
it's
excited about it
fantastic.
now. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
it's
and as a
I can't.
side note, before we move on, like, I think it was that Berlin period you were speaking of.
Yeah,
I was watching some behind the scenes stuff on Oppenheimer recently, and Cillian Murphy was saying how Christopher Nolan would send him when they were talking about like what Oppenheimer would wear, like kind of his style, like getting into character. Christopher Nolan was sending him photos of David Bowie in these like outfits, and I think it was from that like later 70s period, and it's like
yeah,
that's, and then you see I mean, granted, they are different, but it's like
yeah,
it's so interesting how things influence, in
yeah.
media. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't recommend, if you also haven't gone back to that Berlin trilogy. It's Low, Heroes, and then Lodger, I think, is the three on it. Low is a fantastically underrated album. It's so experimental and weird, and like Speed of Light and fucking what was the
Yeah.
Warzawa or something. I always pronounce that wrong. I mean, this is when he's getting like Brian Eno involved and stuff like that. Like,
And then I think it
it's
was like the
fantastic.
next
But
record is when he kind of like came back and started producing like top 40 hits. Like once we hit the
yeah,
80s,
that's
it
when
was like,
Yeah, that's when you start, like, after the Berlin period is where I believe you start getting into the Thin White Dude character, China Girl, Let's Dance, that
Which
sort of stuff.
I love all of that stuff. It's
Yeah,
great, you know.
yeah. So definitely recommend. Like I said, it's one that goes underneath the radar when you had that barrage of like Bowie documentaries that were coming out. Definitely worth checking out. So, what do you got next?
Oh boy, they're all great. These are all great picks tonight. So I'm in heaven right now with this show. All right. So all right, here I'm gonna preface with this. Um, I should have got a clip from the Big Lebowski, but we'll pretend the clip here.
We're gonna start this. We're
It's
gonna do our fight
it's
now.
it's been a long day, and I hate the fucking Eagles. Okay, so here's the deal. I've told the story 1,000 times. Growing up, I was very familiar, obviously, with Hotel California. Growing up on classic rock radio, I heard other songs of theirs, but like obviously the glaring one is Hotel California. And by the time I got into high school, I was so over that. Don't Stop Believing by Journey, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Like it was like I wanted to puke when I heard these songs at this point. They were so nauseating. Bohemian Rhapsody was up there, Sweet Home Alabama. It was so overplayed. And what's great about being an adult is I don't listen to the radio anymore. I just take breaks and then you listen to it and it's like you heard it for the first time. So I say all this to say I was kind of on that, yeah, the Eagles, I was kind of on that train. I was all about Creedence Clearwater Revival, which I still love, obviously. And then I want to say it was like 2011 or 2012, this documentary. I'll play the clip now. History of the Eagles came out, and I watched it just because I'll watch anything for the most part. And not only was I blown away by it, but it really contextualized and made me remember, oh, wow, they have a plethora of phenomenal songs. And then what I really took away from the documentary, watching the clips and listening to them all talk, was how great those harmonies were. So I say all this to say, you know, listen, I will sit. Keith Richards is up there. He's one of them too. But I will just sit and listen to Joe Walsh talk for the rest of time, and he never gets boring.
Yeah,
Ever.
that. So Rob is being very like tepid, and if you don't know, like kind of like he's tiptoeing, is because I like this isn't a meme. This isn't like the Big Lebowski. I fucking hate the Eagles. I fucking hate them with like more so like they are. And but Joe Walsh is the exception. Joe Walsh is always the exception to the rule. Joe Walsh. Everybody else in that band fucking sucks. They suck as human beings. I don't. So I appreciate their place in history. I understand why people
Sure.
like them.
Sure.
They're just fucking terrible. So
I
I'm
do
glad
a
that you like
great cover of Lion Eyes, by the way. But go ahead.
I was just say like this is very weird. I don't want to make this into like a huge like
No,
new
it's
ranting
good.
about
It's
the
all
Eagles
good.
and stuff because this is a documentary that you enjoy and it's one that you've been trying to chip away at me to like watch to see if my cold dead heart towards the Eagles grows a little,
I
becomes a
think you'll
grit.
still dislike Glenn Fry and Don Henley as people because I
Oh
understand
yeah,
why people feel that way 100% because
yeah,
they're very money hungry SOBs. But I do think you would watch it and go, wow, they really did have some great songs. Again, for me,
yeah,
Lion Eyes is my favorite. And it's so interesting because and then like Victim of Love is my second favorite because like there's very much the pre Joe Walsh era and the post Joe Walsh era. And for those of you that don't know this, Joe Walsh was only on their last two albums, Hotel California and The Long Run.
yeah,
So, but sonically, Hotel California, New Kid in Town, Life in the Fast Lane, The Long Run, obviously. Those are all, well, maybe not so much New Kid in Town. I can hear him on the song. But in terms of like his guitar playing, Joe Walsh really changed that band's sound. They went from kind of being almost more of a country band, very singer-songwritery, to a full on rock band. You know, like one of my favorite groups of all time is Bread. Most people don't even know who they are. They're from the 70s. And a lot of their music sounds very similar to early Eagles music, you know.
Yeah.
But the Doc's, what I love about the Doc is, I mean, Bob Seger's in it, because Glenn Frey was like 18 years old singing background vocals on Ramblin' Gamblin' Man in Detroit, you know. So like, for me, what I love about the Doc is all the connections that it's like, they're almost like the Kevin Bacon of the music industry. You've got everybody from Bob Seger to Jackson Brown to Linda Ronstadt, you know, all on down the line. And it's like, oh, JD Souther, who me and my cousin Chad saw in concert in 2022. He was phenomenal. I mean, it was at the City Winery downtown. So it was almost more of a show. He would talk, then he'd play a song, then he'd talk and he'd play a song. And and he's like, you guys know this one. Me and Glenn Frey and Don Henley were sitting and I'm just like, you know, like, right.
See, I'd be throwing things at him if he would start like
that's
that.
Fair. But yeah, so that's what I love about it is like, what you really learn through the Doc is, to me, they're almost like the Kevin Bacon of the music business. Like it's all going to lead back to it somehow. But yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best pitch for me to go back to, is just as a kind of music, not historian, because I don't want to say that but you know, somebody who cares about the history, loves the history and stuff like that. I may go around to it, but I'm still saying fuck Don Henley and fuck Glenn Frey.
And that's a fair statement to make.
Yeah, like it's like Morrissey. It's like this is how I feel. Like
I love Morrissey, but fuck Morrissey.
Yeah, it's one of those things like that. Like most Smith fans love Morrissey and the Smiths. But
by the way, did you see The Killer yet?
No, I haven't. We haven't. No,
you got to watch The Killer, because spoilers, there's a lot of Smiths music in it. So.
Oh, fantastic! Well,
yeah.
It's one of those. I just got rid of Netflix. It was one of those things. So once Sandman comes out and I get it back, and I will go through and watch that. But so it's just a side. I know before we move on this. Sure. My best friend and I have a running bit wherever we're in a public space and Boys of Summer is playing. We will record ourselves looking at the camera, our cell phone camera, and just shaking our head. And that is the running bit that we've had for
so you don't like Boys of Summer
years. No, I don't like Don Henley. I don't like like him. Like,
dude, I can't get enough of.
Speaking of which, our Discord, I found another new way to get pissed off at Don Henley in 2023. I forgot what he said about Frank Ocean, because I was wanting to listen to Love Crime, which is on
What did you say about Frank Ocean?
So Frank Ocean used the sample of Hotel California and kind of did a rendition of it. Okay. And Don Henley, being the crotchety old white fuck that he is, wanted to sit there and dunk on him and say, oh, this guy's talentless and all this other stuff, which is borderline racist, because if he knows anything about Frank Ocean is fucking great and is an actual artist and not one of these, I'm going to throw a sample and be hip hop, whatever, yada, yada, yada. Like, so I was like remembering here's the train of thought.
Yeah.
I love this song, Love Crimes. Why don't I see it anywhere? Oh, I don't see it anywhere because Don Henley has perpetually threatened to sue Frank Ocean into the, like, it's not on, I don't believe it's on Spotify. I don't believe, and he's only got one song on it. Like,
that's so dumb. That makes me so like, we'll save that for another show. Maybe we should do a show called Gripes with Musicians. Because I've got some gripes. Couldn't agree more with what you're saying. I'm not that familiar with Frank Ocean, but that's bullshit. And fuck Don Henley for that. I was actually going to say something else. Oh, side note. I would argue that the Gypsy Kings version of Hotel California, that is all in Spanish, that they play in The Big Lebowski, is just as good, maybe if not better, than the Eagles version. So hot takes.
Hot
takes, kids.
Okay, so we can move on.
We can move on. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just that band brings something dark in me.
It strikes a nerve in Delacommon, so I tread lightly. I love the Eagles, but we will move on because we get.
And it's also tongue in cheek too. So, all right. So speaking of a band that I don't like, to a band that I absolutely fucking love, and I think in the history of music, and we'll discuss this after I show you this,
Okay.
because you and I discussed this a little bit beforehand, before the episode. Man, this documentary is free on YouTube, by the way.
Okay.
It is fantastic if you want to learn the history of a man named Johnny Rotten, aka John Lydon. So the public image is rotten is fantastic. So Rob, we were talking beforehand. You've brought up, I believe you have brought up on the show also that your dad into his like some weird
But yeah,
late
so
late era.
I'll tell the story just in case he's watching or watches at some point. Summer of 22, me and my dad called me and we're on the phone and he's like, I want to say the show was called Pistol, but don't quote me.
That sounds right.
It was a mini series on Hulu and he's like, "Have you seen Pistol?" And you got to understand, my dad raised me on the Beatles, Fleetwood Mac, REM, Elton John, a little bit of Elvis Costello, The Temptations, stuff like that, right? And then like I found Springsteen, Neil Young, those cats on my own. Had a lot of influences over the years, but like specifically from him, like those would probably be the main ones, especially the Beatles. But never in our house. Now, once I discovered these bands, like I would listen to them. But in the house growing up, we weren't playing the Sex Pistols. But he watches and he's like just raving about this, and I'm like, throw him under the bus, tell his age. At the time it would have been 64. At 64 years of age, all of a sudden he's into the Sex Pistols. But I will say this: he got me into the movie Sid and Nancy like 20 years ago. You ever seen Sid and Nancy with Gary Oldman?
Punk Kid. Of course, I've seen Sid and Nancy.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm really interested to watch this Johnny Rotten documentary just on the poster that you showed. That it looks very intriguing. But go ahead.
Yeah, so this whole documentary kind of like it does a little bit at the beginning about the Sex Pistols, but it talks about the band that he created afterwards, which is Public Image Limited. And he did the whole thing as almost an answer to all the bullshit that he went through with the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols were, and you and I have talked about this before, I don't know if it's on here or not, they were almost a gimmick punk band in a way. Yeah. Like they were more marketing. It was all aesthetics and stuff. And it had to do with Malcolm McClure, I think is his name, is who who was in charge of the Sex Pistols and their look and everything like that. And so Johnny Rotten, who, if you ever see the earlier clips of like the famous one where he's talking to the British interviewer and they're being just crass and cussing, which was like mind blowing, all this other stuff. But it talks about just kind of like his evolution and his thoughts into music, which if you ever listen to the band Pill, this is a shorted version of Public Image Limited. I can't stress how much better of a band they are. Like their music is just so much better. And then kind of like his thoughts and philosophy is nobody owns really Pill. They're part of a collective. That's why they're limited, like a limited corporation type deal.
Oh, that's
the whole
cool.
philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
So it carries on about the evolution of that, and band, like a lot of bands, especially like with his, like people coming in, falling out, those stuff, and it's just a fascinating look. And he's somebody that should be really celebrated with the Springsteens, the Lou Reeds, the like that pantheon, but he just hasn't ever really gotten there. Okay. And I just have a new appreciation for his intelligence and his integrity. He's just it's a fantastic documentary. It's not the best produced documentary you're ever going to see. It's not, it's not slick. It's not, but there was one night I was on, YouTube and I was like, I keep seeing this popping up in my suggestions because of course punk is going to pop up in my suggestions. And I'm like, I need to get around to it. And I was so glad I did. Like, I can't recommend this enough. And I even listened to the new Pill. I think it was a song that either came out this year or 2 years ago, and I fucking love it. Like, he's still producing music. And then I learned stuff like I didn't really know before. Like we were talking beforehand. I didn't know Ginger fucking Baker of Cream played on pill albums. Like, just mind blowing.
Speaking of docs, there's one on Netflix that's been in my watch list for so long. I still haven't seen it. The doc on Ginger Baker, who's arguably just a phenomenal drummer. But yeah.
But yeah, you just kind of go through like just this history of this band and the turmoil and the personal stuff and the integrity that this man has. And I just think he should be lauded a lot more than he is, because most people still think of him as Johnny Rotten. And he's not Johnny Rotten, he's John Lydon. And he's, I mean, it's just a fantastic documentary. Can't recommend it enough. So,
and as a side note, like let's contextualize some of this for a second. So, like, I mean, again, you know, you cannot stress enough how impactful. Yes, we both agree the Sex Pistols, it was far less about the music and more about the aesthetics, but you cannot stress enough how important and impactful the Sex Pistols were, not only in England, but especially in America, because you know, it's all happening at once. Like, I'm immediately thinking of 1975, and just like my brain can when I hear 1975 music, in terms of music, my brain goes to like Google Maps and like expands, and I'm looking at the United States and Europe and like what's going on here and what's going on there, and it's like it all came together, and they were a huge force in making the punk rock new wave scene happen. So, you know, you talk about integrity. I don't think, I believe that John Lydon has that integrity, you know?
yeah. And I mean, one of these days in one of our million shows, we are going to do is a punk rock 101 where I take you to school. And I'm going to actually make you listen to bands that you've never heard of, that are fundamental and great. But yeah, fantastic documentary. Even if you're not a punk fan, check it out, because like I said, there's not too many like him anymore. And there's
just not many people like John Lydon, you know, in the history of music.
So, all right. So what's the next one for you?
Definitely. And just for the record, Rob does know a lot about punk rock, but I specifically know about punk rock from like 1975 through like 1980, and then college.
Oh no, we're gonna
go. I went to college rock, but yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not making it sound like you're a complete novice. I'm just saying I'm gonna take you some places when it comes to the punk music. So
2024, we also have to just do rock and roll 101 with special guest Lego. That's going to be the greatest 2 hours maybe of my entire life. So there's that. All right.
We keep coming up with the topic, and I keep saying, hey, how about we nudge it, and you just keep veering back towards it. So I think we're gonna go just that rock 101 with
we're gonna do it. So this next documentary came out, I believe, in 2012. Actually, I know for a fact it came out in 2012. At least that's when I watched it. Got this one. This was one of those, I got the discs, the DVDs from Netflix. So that's how long ago this was, and yet not that long ago at all. I'll just play the clip. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about one of, I think, maybe the, you know, and you get to 20 really quickly, one of the 20 most important people in the history of American popular music. And I say American, even though he's from Liverpool, but George Harrison, listen, at 18 was flying to the United States to play the Ed Sullivan Show with his 3 buddies. They had no idea what was going to happen. By the time he blinked, the Beatles had broken up. He makes a solo album with Phil Spector. He finances, he's buddies with Eric Idle and John Cleese and those guys, and finances Monty Python and the Life of Brian, because no Hollywood studio would make that movie. It's a phenomenal movie. He's a catalyst and a part of what I would probably consider to be the greatest super group of all time, that is the Traveling Wilburys. Um, you know, and he was a humanitarian. He long before Live Aid and Farm Aid and all of these charity shows that they do, he invented the rock star giving back with the concert for Bangladesh that happened over 50 years ago, that had everybody from Leon Russell to Bob Dylan to Ringo Starr showed up to that. Eric Clapton, Billy Preston. It's a running joke in my family. Nobody outside of my family will get this, but we've forgotten Billy Preston. It's a line from the concert from Bangladesh when he's introducing everyone. George Harrison, yes. On paper, I like Paul's songs the best. But in terms of a human, George Harrison is by far my favorite out of the Beatles.
I concur.
I could literally go on for the next 30 minutes. I'm going to cut it to you, Delacommon. What do you have to say about the great George Harrison and living in the material world?
I was going to say, once again, this is another documentary that not really ringing bells for me, like when it comes to it. But I do want to say, like, I do remember watching it and having my reaffirm that, like, as it seems human being and kind of artist. And once again, we just talked about integrity when it came to John Lydon. George Harrison to me is, and I don't know how old this clip is. Have you heard this clip that of recent? I think I've heard of it recently.
Okay.
Where Paul was still kind of smacked back John Lennon from the grave, talking about how him and Yoko were kind of full of shit and how
I haven't.
Oh, okay. So that just brings me back to my point that out of all of them, out of those two big egos, George Harrison was kind of the unsung hero of that band. Like, the man had to practice vast meditation practices with the yogis across India to deal with those fucking two. Like, I love them both. I love John and Paul, but
and Ravi Shankar changed his life. I mean, the whole idea of meditation. I mean, again, I can't recommend this documentary enough. It is 2 parts. Part 1 is basically from cradle to the Beatles breaking up. And then part 2 starts with the All Things Must Pass album and goes through his death. And Olivia Harrison, for 20 years, I've been fascinated hearing her stories about her marriage to George and George's life and everything. Danny Harrison, who looks just like him. This, by the way, we're talking, I couldn't decide if I was going to watch that Alden Ehrenreich movie that's on Netflix, was going to rewatch Heat, but now I'm thinking I might rewatch Concert for George tonight. We've talked about that on our favorite live concerts. But what's so great is the doc, it goes through his whole life, and you hit the nail on the head. When you're sitting in a room, listen, let's set talent aside. Ego. When you're sitting in a room with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and it's 1966, and there's 12 tracks on the album, you got 44 minutes of playing time. Do you really think you're going to get more than one song on there?
Yeah.
This motherfucker was just stockpiling for years. I mean, it's like listening to the Abbey Road sessions and the outtakes from that and the Let It Be sessions and the outtakes from that. It's like, wait, George had all those songs then. They just didn't make the record. And then he starts putting out his solo material, and it's like, okay, it's wild. But yeah, ego. And before we continue, I gotta say this. And I love Paul McCartney, but it's like, I feel like the last 5 years, he's like addicted to the camera. He did that great doc with Rick Rubin where they like went through a bunch of Beatles tracks and stuff. But I've just noticed he's just been doing so many interviews. I'm sure it's because he's kind of like in the latter part of his life, and I'm sure he just wants to get all this stuff out while he's still around. But have you noticed that? Like, he's just been on so many things lately.
He's never been my favorite out of any of them, and that's part of the reason why, like, for a man that I don't know, I really don't even know how to articulate it. Like, he's the one that's making sure that
they're remembered.
He's like a mascot almost of the Beatles.
There you
Like,
go.
and that's where it is. It's like, okay, there's any type of like Beatles thing going on. Let's wheel out, even though Paul can still move around. And we gave it like, it's not all hate. We gave him praise in this last one about how his little snippet on bass that Stones album was fucking mind blowing. Like, just
Dude, he's so like he's 80
like
years
I'm like,
old.
where is that? Because like Paul McCartney, full disclosure, his solo shit, I could care less. Ram is a good album. I fucking love Ram. For some
McCartney,
reason, I love
Ram,
Ram,
and
right?
Band on the Run are great albums, but yeah.
But I'm just like, where was this? The whole post Beatles for me, because if this was what I got, just a little snippet of the fucking Stones just saying, "Hey, check out this funky ass bass," and he fucking rips. Yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, Paul does very much. He seems like he just. It's almost like Paul acts like if he doesn't go out and like, I don't want to say shuck and drive, but like,
No, you're right
do
about
his
mascot
shtick.
though. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just the mascot.
Yeah, people will
we're
forget
somehow
them.
gonna forget that the Beatles. Yeah, like, come
Yeah.
on, dude.
Like there's no, you can't
Yeah.
listen. As a side note, and there's I have a comment and then I have a question and then we can move on to your next pick. My comment is there's this new, this is a John Lennon song, but there's this new Amazon commercial that has been playing before YouTube videos of that I've watched, and one of the movies I saw recently in the theater, they played this ad before the trailers, and it's a cover version. I don't know who the artist is, but it's an Amazon commercial with these elderly people. And they're playing In My Life. There are places I remember.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, no, listen, Paul, you don't have to do all this work. We're not going to forget the Beatles. The Beatles are going to be around for a long time. And I mean that sincerely. Like, they're not going anywhere. Next year, like, I haven't announced this yet, but like 2024, I've been excited about the year 2024 for like 10 years. Is my most excited year maybe ever, because we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the British invasion, the 70th anniversary of On the Waterfront, amongst a lot of other things. And I'm super excited. My question for you is this before we move on. If you had to pick off the top of your head, favorite George Harrison song?
I mean, do we count My Guitar Gently Weeps?
It doesn't matter. I'm talking about a song he wrote. Lennon and McCartney didn't write that song. So
yeah, that's
whether
hands down. You could have done that song and walked away and not had. I do have a funny memory. I have a memory when I was a kid of watching Got My Mind Set on You. And that music video is so weird. It creeped me out as a kid. I think it was second to only that one Michael Jackson one where Bubbles is on the chimp is on a roller coaster with him. It's only like one and two. That it's just so weird. And so those are the two that come to mind. Only one is one of the greatest songs of all time. Once again, we talk about this every time George Harrison comes up. Go watch the Prince Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. My Guitar Gently Weeps. For the longest time, nobody seemed to see this, and then all of a sudden,
except for people like us, yeah.
But then the more time goes on, I hear people talking about it. I'm like, good, because this performance needs to be. And yeah, that song fucking just mind blowing, the best. That's why he is my favorite Beatle out of all all of them. So yeah, that's just fantastic. So I'm glad that you brought up not only Phil Spencer, but you brought up Leon Russell, because Phil Spector, sorry. What did I say?
I don't know. One of the shows we did recently, you said so, and I knew what you meant, but it was really funny. The other one you said it too. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I do remember that because you corrected me on it, and I'm like, really? Did I just say that?
Yeah.
I'm
you said Mick Jones, and we were talking about Mick Taylor. That's what it was.
Oh, that was in the Discord.
Yeah.
I got
I know what you're saying.
I got Brian Jones and mixed up with Mick Taylor. All right, so it's great. I'm glad that you brought this up. This was going to be on your list. We talked about it, and it did not, but it absolutely made my list because you and I, one of our conversations, were like, "Have you seen this? Have you seen this?" If you have not seen this documentary and you need to know about the history of rock and roll and the history of pop music, this is your. Oh man, the fucking Wrecking Crew. I'm not even gonna call it the Wrecking Crew. It's the fucking Wrecking Crew. This was such a revelation of a fucking documentary to watch because I knew of them, but I really didn't realize their impact, especially on that era of music. And I mean, I love Leon. Like, it was one of those things where I didn't even know Leon Russell was in it. I know Leon Russell from "Stranger in a Strange Land," which is one of my favorite songs of all time. Also, because my cousin grew up in Oklahoma, and every year Leon Russell would do a huge concert, and he's just kind of the mascot, and just I have such respect for him. The Wrecking Crew, if you don't know who the Wrecking Crew is, the Wrecking Crew was a studio session band, essentially, is what they were. And they were not famous. They weren't ever going to be on tour with all these people, but they had such an impact. So I'm just going to look at,
I mean,
so I
like,
pulled up Wikipedia.
yeah, while you're pulling that up, like, for example, like Glenn Campbell was a member of the Wrecking Crew
Yeah.
before he started making his own albums. And he's one of the greatest country artists that's ever lived, you know.
So here we go. Selected recordings. I'm just going to go
Let's
through.
do it.
Just
Name them all.
selected.
Name them all.
Be My Baby, I Get Around, Everybody Loves Somebody, You've Lost That Loving Feeling, Help Me Rhonda, Mr. Tambourine Man, the Birds version, California Dreaming, I Got You Babe by Sonny and Cher, holy, like Monday by the Mamas and the Papas, Strangers in the Night. I forgot that they played on the Sinatra one, and I think they
That's
covered
my
it
favorite Sinatra song. Yeah.
Yeah. I Won't Dance is my favorite.
Okay.
Mrs. Robinson. Like, just the list goes on and on of like just the fucking heavy hitters of those eras. Like,
Well, all those
know,
Monkees records,
yeah,
you know, they did. I mean, fuck, Neil Diamond wrote a lot of those songs. Neil Diamond was a part of that scene. And yeah, a lot of that Beach Boys stuff from that era as well, along with the California bands and the New York bands with Phil Spector stuff.
Yeah, and they talk about in the documentary about Brian Wilson's fascination with the band and how probably without that band, Animal Sounds doesn't exist. Doesn't.
The last time I'm
I
going to
mean,
correct you, it's Pet Sounds.
Pet Sounds. That's right.
It's all
No,
good.
you can.
It's
No,
the
you can correct
disease.
me.
It's the disease. The infections. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, just the like this documentary is just once again not the best, well produced, not the slickest documentary you're ever going to see, but it is just mind blowing. Like, I just jaw to the floor watching this documentary, and for people like you and I, where we get excited, we get amped, and I was from start to finish, there wasn't anything that I didn't love about this. And it's a band that I'm glad that this exists because there's at least public record of it, but they should be so much more celebrated than. I mean, when
it's the same.
I'm just looking at this list again, and it's like, good God.
I mean, it's the same with the Muscle Shoals rhythm section and the Funk Brothers, you know, out of Motown Records, and we go on and on. We should do an episode on just all that sort of stuff.
So yeah,
so I have
fantastic
a quick story
documentary. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick story to tell that I don't think you know this yet. Excuse me. Yeah, we're both still sinusy, so I keep turning. I'm blowing my nose, not snorting cocaine. So the year was 2011, and I was really into at this point, like, excuse me. At this point, like, documentaries were really starting to get uploaded to YouTube at this time. This is when YouTube was still like the Wild West. So like stuff that's not on there anymore because for copyright reasons, but it was on there then. And I say this to say, in a different documentary, learned they did like 15 minutes on the Wrecking Crew. And I was like, ooh. So I looked them up, and there was a trailer for this documentary that existed. And I was like, when is this coming out? When is this coming out? And in the description, it said, you know, click this link and sign up for our newsletter to find out more information on the film. So I did. And I'm not kidding. I believe it was finally released in 2013. But for 2 years, I followed this and would get email updates like almost every month, updating on the progress of so they had filmed the doc already. What happened was they needed to get the licensing rights for all of the music, and that cost a lot of money. I actually donated $10 to get that made. It's all I had. I'm still poor. But I remember I was like, I can give them $10. And because they were asking for donations to like kind of help crowdfund the cost for these licensing rights for these songs. And you could donate like any amount of money. There was like a drop down menu and all that sort of stuff. I remember giving them $10. I think it was in like 2012, like when I was actually like making money at the time. And so when it finally came out, it was as much of a celebration for me as anything because I'd been following this for so long. I believe if you watch the doc and you get to the end of it, I think most of it was filmed in like 2009. But that's how long it took them to secure all the licensing rights. So as a side note, it's got nothing to do with appreciating the documentary, but that's how much goes into this stuff. So like when you're focusing on a singular artist, all they got to do is sign off on it. It's easy. But that list you just read is so eclectic and so many different record labels and so many different egos and bands and songwriters. Like it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress, even like you said, if you just look up the Wikipedia, it says house band responsible for hundreds of top 40 hits in that era. Like you would not have the Wall of Sound that Spectre was known for. It's just one of those like just mind-blowing documentaries, and I can't recommend it, especially if you're a music nerd and you want to know history. It's one of those must-see documentaries.
And I can't say this enough. Without the Wall of Sound, there is no Born to Run. Without Pet Sounds that the Wrecking Crew was involved with for Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, there is no Sgt. Pepper. All on down the line. It's so all interconnected and intertwined. Context is very important. And yes.
So,
all right.
Next one.
Shall we move on? Okay.
We shall.
All right. So this next one, similar to Marty Scorsese, who directed No Direction Home. This documentary, when I found out who was directing this documentary, I could not have gotten more excited because he's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, made arguably one of my top 25 films ever, The Last Picture Show. The director is Peter Bogdanovich. For those of you that maybe don't know his films, you would know him for playing Lorraine Bracco's therapist in The Sopranos. He guest starred on a few episodes of that. And the subject matter is no other than the late, great Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So this documentary, I believe, came out in 2006. And I remember Ebert and Roper reviewed it on their show. And I thought that was really cool. And what was great was, so Tom had just dropped a new album, one of my favorite Tom Petty albums, Highway Companion, produced by Jeff Lynne. And I remember they were on the Tonight Show that summer and they played, I think it was Saving Grace, one of the songs off that record. And I had just gotten into Tom's music maybe like 2 years earlier. I heard Refugee and I heard Free Fallin' on the radio, and it like, who is this guy that kind of sounds like Bob Dylan, but he's a better singer than Bob Dylan, and he's got this like crazy great rock and roll band, and whoever the hell's playing the keyboards, that guy should be nominated for sainthood, because I didn't know who Benmont Tench III was yet, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Benmont Tench III, okay? So long story short, so like the Highway Companion record comes out. They were on Jay Leno, who I watched at the time, and all this stuff was like happening. So when it came out on DVD, I was at the video store, shout out to Good Times Videos, no longer in business, in New Lenox, Illinois, and rented Running Down a Dream, and I watched it. And this was one, like, we talk about like VH1 Behind the Music and VH1's classic album series and like stuff like that. Like, I was familiar with that. But other than No Direction Home and the Beatles Anthology, which the Beatles Anthology almost made my list, but there are things that trump it now for me. This would be like the third real music documentary that I'd ever seen. And again, let me just give you some highlights, okay? His first two albums produced by Denny Cordell, who they knew who Denny Cordell was because of Leon Russell records, okay? Then they hook up with Jimmy Iovine, who's hot off of cutting Patti Smith's Horses and another record that we're going to talk about later in the show. May or may not be by Bruce Springsteen. They hook up with Jimmy Iovine, and again, I'll shout out my dad again. I remember he told me in 1979 when Damn the Torpedoes came out, he's like, you got to understand, I'd never heard drums like that before. And I mean, going back and listening to the drums on Refugee, it's like, whoa, whoa. Then he does a couple records with Jimmy Iovine, and then he becomes buddies with this guy, Dave Stewart, who's in this band Eurythmics. And they make this album called Southern Accents, which has maybe one of the trippiest songs I've ever heard in my life before, with Don't Come Around Here No More. And then ends up going on tour with Bob Dylan, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are Bob Dylan's backing band. And then they start the Traveling Wilburys. And then him and Jeff Lynne he decides he's going to make a solo record. And they make Full Moon Fever, which is arguably his biggest selling album of all time, with here's some hits: You're So Bad, Running Down a Dream, Free Fallin'. Huge, fucking huge. Okay. Rick Rubin, who was not into Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, heard Full Moon Fever and was like, I got to work with this guy at some point. Few years later, Tom Petty wants to get out of his record contract. I'm giving you the gist here. Like, this is the immense talent here. And mind you, backtrack a little bit, did some of the greatest duets in the history of rock and roll with Stevie Nicks, Insider and Stop Dragging My Heart Around. Rick Rubin. So Tom wants to get out of his record contract. They're like, well, you can't until you put out a greatest hits album. And we're going to need you to record a new song for this greatest hits album. And he's like, well, I got this song called Indiana Girl that I never finished for the last record. Retitles it Mary Jane's Last Dance. Becomes his biggest hit to date on his greatest hits album as a bonus track. Okay.
Yeah.
And then after his greatest hits, he makes maybe his best album ever with Rick Rubin in Wildflowers, which is Chris Stapleton's favorite album of all time. And it's like, well, no wonder Chris Stapleton writes such great music. His favorite album is Wildflowers. Okay. And then Echo was a great underrated album. And The Last DJ was a great album with my favorite Tom Petty song. With that I'm blanking. Have Love Will Travel, right? And then puts Highway Companion out, reconnects with Jeff Lynne, makes a blues record with Mojo. I mean, this guy, literally a few months before he died, he did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, which I don't care for them anymore, and he was so excited about the band's next project. Like, he was looking down the road and like, I think our next album is going to be our best album ever. And unfortunately, then he had a heart attack and passed away. But the legacy of Tom Petty, and I wish he would have gotten more of this when he was still alive, but I'm so happy that since he has passed, so many people have now come out and been like, the whole reason I'm doing this is because I was rocking to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I mean, they're arguably, in terms of American bands, and listen, the Heartbreakers they're not hired guns. It's Mike Campbell, Ben Tench III. It was Stan Lynch, then it was Steve Ferrone. It was Ron Blair, then it was Howie Epstein. Howie passed away. Ron Blair came back to play bass with them for the last 15 years of their career, 20 years of their career.
Yeah.
They're as much like the Beatles as anybody else. Like, they're not just a backing band, and this documentary really drives that home. So I'll stop ranting, but that's how excited
I let you guys, I know. And also, this is kind of, and we've, if you want to, once again, go back to our previous episodes, we covered the first 3 or 5 albums of Tom Petty's career, like in the Heartbreakers, with the first 5
albums, I believe.
And it's kind of great. And, it's kind of like you and I kind of got geeked out because we were talking about the legacy. And of course, Tom Petty is up there in the Mount Rushmore for you and I. Last Dance with Mary Jane was an unofficial anthem of Indiana. It has been. He would tour every year here. It was fucking massive. Like, there's not everybody and their mom likes Tom Petty here. Like, um, and I'm reiterating because believe me, I think Tom Petty and them are higher up. Like when we have bands that we both enjoy and stuff, I'm with you that they should be massively notches higher when it comes to the recognition and talking about that. And it's also kind of cool that when Grand Theft Auto came out with their new trailer, fantastic.
Love is a Long Road, which not enough people know that song. So
yeah.
I don't know if you saw
Full Moon Fever. Most people like only know like Free Fallin' and like and we didn't even discuss that because we didn't even talk about his solo because this is technically technically a solo.
We stopped with his 5th album. Yeah, we only did the first 5.
Yeah. I mean that album alone, Running Down a Dream, like just that like that's a murderer's row of an album. So, but yeah, it's very very much so. And I'm kind of ashamed I haven't seen this documentary because
you gotta watch it. You're gonna love it.
Bogdanovich is up there with me. I'm with you. Like Last Picture Show is fantastic. He did such amazing work that like you can't name it off the top of your head. But I definitely need to see this documentary because I'm in on the two main elements of what you're talking about is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Bogdanovich doing the documentary.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention because of their connection with Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin was now producing Johnny Cash, making the greatest Johnny Cash albums that Johnny Cash ever made. And he's like, so Johnny kind of wants to do like a rock and roll record for his second album. And Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are Johnny Cash's backing band on Unchained. And it's like, no, I didn't know it when I first heard the album. I found out about it because of this documentary. It's like, no wonder that album slaps, is what the youngsters would say, slaps so fucking hard. You know,
the youngsters 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's how even older we are. All right. So that you got anything final thoughts to wrap up on this?
Please, everybody. I know I gave you the 2-minute bio. Please go watch this documentary. It, in terms of American artists, he's up there. He's up there.
Yeah. And it was also cool that they also like Tom Petty's official social media account praised Grand Theft Auto, and that's pretty progressive when it comes to, and we talked about with us, he was very much about integrity. Very much about integrity. We talked about that quite a lot during that episode. Go back to our previous episodes. Fantastic discussion. So my next one, I'm going to cheat.
Go ahead. And cheat away.
I'm going to cheat because this is technically a television series, which you have one yourself. Mm-hmm. Technically television. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, oh my God, was this like a breath of fresh air when I first saw it. And I believe you've seen it. Like I think we're one of the few people that I know that have actually seen this documentary. 7 Ages of Rock, produced by the BBC. So one of the things I loved, once again, we were talking about like the behind the musics, the classic albums, is there was a period, especially in the late 90s into the 2000s, where you would have the BBC has always done fantastic
Their under review series. I cannot recommend it enough. Yes.
So this came to me. There was a time where, we had a lot of stuff like you and I would nerd out of them. We would have VH1 used to do 100 Greatest Artists. They would do their 100 greatest albums, and they really like did well documented series. So those kind of shows prime me for this. Now, what the 7 Ages of Rock does is it breaks it up into 7 ages, and it covers a fuckload of time. Like it pretty much covers. There's kind of a hook on each one. So like, the kind of one that talks about like the 60s and psychedelica is all hooked around Jimi Hendrix, and kind of tells his story, but also does all the branches through. And they do a beautiful job of. They will pick a through line of a person or what's going on. One great one. So let me look this up real quick because I want to get all 7 stages because like 7 ages. This is like once again a 7-part series. They're about I believe they're an hour each, something like that, and they are available online. you kind of have to get. It's not the best website in the world. It's kind of like a site that collects all of these documentaries because I couldn't find this for the longest time, and I was thrilled when I had.
If you look hard enough on YouTube, you can find it.
Yeah. But
that's how I watched it.
Yeah, I believe that's originally how. So, covers up in the sections. You have Birth of Rock, which, like I said, that really kind of
Fats
covers
Domino,
it.
Jerry Lee Lewis.
And it also does the timeline with, they tie it into early rock and roll with, Jimi Hendrix being the backup for Little Richard. And so it kind of goes in that. And then you go into art rock, which is more of your Velvet Underground, your what was it? Velvet art rock would be Velvet Underground, Floyd. I think it was Floyd, and then it talks like Genesis, like Peter Gabriel,
sure,
that sort of stuff. Patty, it kind of goes when you go into like, I want to say offshoot of what would
art
be,
rock would be like Talking
punk.
Heads as well.
Yeah. Then you go punk, which of course it covers on that, and I think it's one of the better ones on punk.
That's great.
It's a fantastic episode. Then they do metal, which that one I don't really remember as much as. I think it was my least favorite one out of all of them. Then they did Stadium Rock, which it gets into
Queen,
kind of like
Zeppelin.
Yeah, that sort of Queen, Zeppelin, that sort of stuff, like the big, massive alternative rock, which I believe it's very weird because they're named one thing in the American and then there's something else. So they are all broken down. Like this one that says alternative rock is actually called Left of the Dial, and it's about college rock. And then
REM,
the through line is REM, and then it goes into like your Nirvanas, your stuff like that. And we really should at some point go through our review of each of these episodes because they're that fantastic. Do that as a series where we just talk about it because there's so much to cover. Like I'm giving you like just the basic bones of what it is. It's so in depth, fantastic interviews. One of my favorites towards the end of it is British indie rock, which covers kind of like the history of pre Britpop and then kind of post Britpop, and then what became around the time it was around current, but it's not so much current now. Like there was a period of like British indie where you had like the Libertines, Charlatan, or not. Yeah. Gets into like that.
I know they covered Oasis at some point.
Oh, Oasis is the centerpiece of that because, you even had Noel Gallagher, who's part of the Spiral Carpets, which also talks about the Stone Roses, which also talks about Pulp, which talks about Suede, which always talks about just kind of like what kind of the resurgence of what always happens with England, where they'll go away for a while. And they come, like, within a generation, they have these amazing ass bands, and they go away for a little bit, and then they just, it's kind of the cycle nature of like, the British and American trading off. So it's a fantastic series. Like I said, I felt like it was cheating because it's 7 hours, whereas every of these are usually,
because because I saw you were including this, I decided not. So I'll make this quick. That series you're talking about, I caught it on YouTube, like 2011, 2012 era.
Yeah.
For me, so there's an American version of that same series. It's called The History of Rock and Roll that Time Life did in 1995. And when I was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004, I think I spent like $75 on this. This is the DVD box set. It was 5 discs and it was 10 episodes. And it was the same format. They didn't center on a figure per se for each one, but it was like the birth of rock and roll, the British invasion, Dylan hits the scene, pop, 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 all the way through the grunge movement. And then that's because it came out in 95. So that's kind of when it ends. And that's what I grew up with. And I've shown that to a few friends of mine over the years. And they watch it and they're like mind blown and they're like, oh my God, like, And what I always tell people is, and I would say the same thing for 7 Ages of Rock, for as great as they are and as in depth as they are, as you said, they're still like a jumping off point if you're interested in music, because it's like you can watch that and then go, not so much into that or that, but I really like this, this, and this. And then you can go find hours of other documentaries on, whatever that be. Great example would be the Little Richard doc that just came out this year that I loved. I was vaguely enough familiar with Little Richard, but what a life, what a man, so yeah.
Yep. All right, we're getting to your penultimate one out of our list.
Wow, we're at the penultimate already. Wow, these shows just fly by. So 2020, ladies and gentlemen, what a clusterfuck of a year. I went into 2020 grinning ear to ear, thrilled to finally see Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary. Because of the pandemic, it got delayed to 2021, but that was the greatest Thanksgiving Day weekend of my entire life. Was literally waiting until midnight or 2 a.m. rather, because I'm Central Time, every night for Disney Plus to drop the next part. And I was staying up until about 5 o'clock in the morning that whole weekend watching these as soon as they came out. I believe it was 3 parts. I'm not the only person that has said this. I've heard many award-winning songwriters say how they openly wept watching this Get Back documentary. I didn't openly weep, but there were definitely some scenes, like I got chills multiple times. There's a few times I teared up. I think for any of us that were influenced by the Beatles, so that could literally be anybody post 1964, which is basically 60 years ago, to get to be a fly on the wall and see all of this footage of arguably the greatest band of all time, having gone through all the things that they've gone through. They're in this transitional period. Again, it's the Beatles. Most people, I think, know enough about the Beatles, so I won't go that far into it because I just can't recommend it enough. But there's a scene. Most people talk about the scene when Paul's fiddling around on the bass and he starts writing "Get Back," right? It just like the riff comes. But for me, there's a scene where George is playing "All Things Must Pass." And the fact that that didn't make the album, that did not make the Let It Be album.
Yeah.
That's the level of talent we're talking about. Right? Have you seen this?
Yeah, I've seen it.
So what are you?
I like the first 2 parts. I believe it when you were talking about on the documentary.
Part 3 is mostly the rooftop concert.
Yeah, and so my feeling.
You sigh. What's up with the rooftop?
No, I'm just, this is my sigh overall. Also, I'm running out of energy, man. So, yeah. But also I want to say, like, when you brought up the anthology, and this kind of goes back to my gripe from previous when we were talking about Paul. Please let this be the bookend. Let this be the bookend of documentaries about the Beatles, about it is, because I remember the same as you. I remember when the anthology came out, and that was a big fucking deal. And kind of this, once again, like every 10 years, let's cram more Beatles down everybody's throats. And once again, I say this by saying they're one of the greatest bands of all time. Like, I'm not denying it, and I love the Beatles, even though I'm a Stones guy.
The Beatles anthology, ladies and gentlemen.
But it just seems after money grab after money grab. I mean, you remember when them announced for Apple when they were finally on iTunes back in the day.
Dude, the billboards were all over Chicago.
So what I'm here to say is I love this documentary. It's well done. It's fantastic. I'm not. I know I'm going to get like crucified for this by friends, but I am not a Peter Jackson fan overall. I don't think he's as great as everybody makes it. So I came into this skeptical because I think a lot of his stuff is serviceable. Okay. Great. You did Lord of the Rings. Big freaking whoop.
Listen, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, I know this is where I'm going to get crucified because I'm not the biggest Lord of the Rings fan. But still, now I'm rambling. But what I'm saying is this is such a fantastic documentary that, like, it really deserves to be the bookend on. And I said it in a cynical way, but I really do mean this in a positive way. Yeah. This really needs to be the bookend when it comes to like Beatles documentary. I agree. Stuff you've never seen that like nobody's seen. It's compelling. It's beautiful. Like the way they restored it, like all the footage and stuff like that is just fantastic. Like on every front, I love the rooftop one. I think by the time I think I tried to binge it, and that was probably the wrong thing to do.
Oh no, you can't binge that.
So I probably should go. I should go back because I could make it through the first two perfectly on board. And I think I need to go back to the third one, but I still recognize
you get tired of Paul after a while. He's definitely the antagonist in the documentary. So like, I'm so glad I didn't. I mean, I wouldn't have binged it anyways because I was drooling waiting for each episode.
I remember you in the Discord.
Oh yeah. Like, but I mean, do you know what I mean about Paul? How like by the time you get to part 3, you're just like, just shut the fuck up already about these live shows. Like, just who gives a shit? You know?
Yeah. So, and also doesn't do our reputation. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where when we talk, it sounds like we hate Paul, but we don't hate Paul. Like, it's just
he's arguably one of the greatest creative geniuses of the 20th century. You know, he's undeniable, but he does get annoying after a while.
He's also a pretentious ass. So, but yeah, so that was fantastic. Good choice. I really like this documentary. I think I held off on it because I really didn't want to, like, you and I talked about this, where I will hear the hype coming and I don't want to be annoyed by the hype. So I will hang back a little bit and then make my judgment outside of that. Because I just don't want to be influenced by that.
Sure.
That's a weird contrarian streak in me that just won't go away from high school. So, but no, this is a fantastic choice, fantastic documentary. And I really do believe it is so well done. Let this be the bookend.
Well, so before we move on, that's what I wanted to end with. I could not agree with your point more. I really hadn't given it that much thought prior to you saying it. But I think between the Beatles anthology, the George Harrison Living in the Material World documentary, the McCartney 3-2-1 with Rick Rubin, where they like literally like break down the songs in the studio, and the Get Back doc. If you're somebody like, if I was raising a child that didn't know who the Beatles were, that's what I would show them. And I feel that that's all they need to see in terms of documentaries or retrospectives or whatever have you, to fully understand that's the best material you're ever going to get and you're never going to beat it. I don't think there's, 16 millimeter footage of them doing the Revolver sessions. So to your point, be done. The Beatles will live on for a long time. They've already hit Mozart, Beethoven level. They're going to be around for a while. So
yeah, every child is born to admit that they are forced to admit like some weird dictatorial subscribed doctrine. You must agree that the Beatles are the greatest of all time.
But that being said,
there are supplemental things. I think we talked about this once again. It's a great documentary. Unsung hero when we talk about this stuff is American Masters that PBS does. They do a lot of fantastic documentaries. One of my favorite ones was John Lennon's Jukebox. I believe we talked about this.
I've never seen that one.
And my favorite one, fantastic.
My favorite one is the Merle Haggard one, and I can't find it. I watched it one time. I can't find it anywhere. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I've seen the Merle Haggard one.
Fantastic.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. That's one thing. Hey, PBS, we pay for you. Let's get the shit together. Like, quit putting on your crappy streaming service and start cataloging, like, because you have fantastic shows. But American Masters has a lot of great music ones.
And I'd love to see that John Lennon Jukebox. And I'll say this is the last thing I'll say. My nephew who just turned 9, JJ, who's been on the show multiple times, not this show, but the RFN in general. This past summer, I babysat him a few times, and his dad played him like Yellow Submarine and Hey Jude. So like he was familiar with those songs. But he was 8 at the time. I got this 8-year-old kid to sit down, and I kind of had to like hype it up a little bit. But we watched the Rooftop concert twice because we watched it once, and then the next day I was watching him again, and he's like, "Can we put on the Rooftop concert?" And I was like, yeah. So I got him a Beatles t-shirt for his birthday a couple weeks ago. I think that's further proof. Paul McCartney doesn't need to be coming out doing it. Like, it's a legacy.
Yeah, AJ doesn't need to be 20 and see the Crypt Keeper come out and tell you how the Beatles are fantastic. I love that you are corrupting in the best way.
I got him.
Helen's
I got.
son.
I didn't tell. I
That
didn't tell
makes
you
me
this. I
laugh.
got him a Rolling Stones t-shirt too. He can choose. He can choose his
Excellent.
own path.
Well, give him about another 2 years, and if we're still doing the show, he'll be on it.
Oh, dude, I can't wait till he's a few years older. We can bring him on and be like, so who do you like better? You know,
Yeah.
what band? What? Or maybe he'll be like me and be like, I like both. You know.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to do either or propositions on that one.
Sure.
All right. So my last one is a fantastic documentary. I rewatched this not too long ago. Once again, when we talk about the barrage of like documentaries, you've had nothing but documentaries about this man since his death. And it is one of my favorite documentaries of all time, one of the most inventive documentaries, period. Like it's probably the best, like out of my pick, it's the best movie. And that is Kurt Cobain montage of heck. This I cannot. So there's a period, and I still think it persists to this day, where Nirvana is unfairly. I blame hipsters for this.
I blame hipsters for a lot of things.
Yeah, but I'm also like, look at me. I can't really. I'm criticizing my own.
You're not really a hipster. Yeah.
No, I'm just a punk kid that's stuck in a hipster existence right now. But it became very weird. There was like a generational shift where they almost want to downplay the importance of Nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize that out of all those bands from the grunge area, Nirvana's the most punk out of all of them.
Yeah.
Soundgarden's not punk. Alice in Chains is not punk. Pearl Jam's not punk. The roots of it's pretty much like if you go through like if the premise of the movie is just kind of following Kurt Cobain's journey from as his kid there's a lot of like themes that I really relate to, like the alienation of divorced parents, the tumultuous time we grew up kind of. I mean, let's just say I was probably like what they came out in 91, 92, so I was 6
91
or 7.
was Nevermind.
Yeah, so I was 6, 7, and around this time was where my uncle, before he passed away, was a huge influence in music on me when I was a kid. One of these things we really need to like do a show where we're talking about our people personally close to us,
our gatekeepers of the music growing up.
Yeah, pretty much the ones like that. So my uncle David was very much into that. So Nirvana for me was not a high school thing. That was from ground 6, 7 years old. So Kurt Cobain was just always this mythic character in my life growing up. And then you just see this documentary and it just goes through just kind of the tortured soul. And you really go through, and you've had a lot of documentaries that are pretty trash, like Kurt and Courtney and all the conspiratorial and all
I've
that
seen
other
that.
stuff.
I can't stand that stuff.
This is the best I've seen done on this, when it describes like just how pathetic, not pathetic, I don't want to make it sound like it's too bad, because there are some beautiful moments in it, but just how bad his drug addiction was, and especially his time with Courtney Love. Like there's a lot of home movies that like they got a hold of. There's a lot of stuff. It's just a crazy ass documentary. Like I said, they do innovative things with animation. They do innovative things, just kind of bringing together like this really creative tortured genius. Like I don't think I kind of push back on the notion that every genius has to be a tortured artist, or kind of that notion like every great comic has to be terrible upbringing. I don't subscribe to that notion, but when it comes to Kurt Cobain, like it's very much so. Like there was no way there's no other way that this story is going to end. If you really look at like the trajectory of what happened, there's always a chance that you hope that it would have pulled out of it. And that's one of the things that's kind of great about the documentary is, the hit, like it's like watching the Titanic, what's happening at the end.
Yeah.
But you're still rooting for him to pull out of whatever darkness that existed in him. And that darkness, I mean, it covers everything from pre-Nirvana all the way to, I think it's pretty much his death, but like a lot of the stuff is covered, especially the outtakes that they like, the footage you never saw from the MTV, the legendary MTV Unplugged. Like, it's just, I can't recommend this documentary enough. And like, it got a whole sorts of praise. If you look in Rolling Stone's, like, once again, Rolling Stone, the name we love to hate when it comes to publications.
We'll do a whole show on that, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk about Rolling Stone magazine some other point.
But when I was going through and I was making sure, it's mainly I looked at it to see, hey, is there anything that I'm obvious ones that I'm missing in my list? And they have Montage of Heck, I believe, number 7 of all time. And I really think it's higher than that because it's so. If you've not seen it, I believe it's on HBO Max or whatever it's called now. Yeah, Max. I still want to call it HBO. It's like it's not X, it's Twitter. And it's not Max, HBO Max.
So, as a side note, I will say this because I'm slightly younger than you. So, again, in my household, like I was not raised on Nirvana nor the grunge movement at all. I learned about that in the early mid 2000s when I was watching the history of rock and roll and all those. Again, we have to do an episode and I can find the clips on YouTube, but we have to do an episode just for nostalgic purposes on all of those great VH1 countdowns, the 100 greatest hard rock bands. I remember Led Zeppelin was number 1.
That's how I found my favorite artist of all time, Jeff Buckley. That is how I found it. See? In 1990, or this got to be 2000, 2001.
Sure. So like I say all that to say, I was very familiar with the song "Smells Like Teen Spirit" because I think everybody is. But I past that, I wasn't really familiar with Nirvana. And then I read, I believe it was in Rolling Stone magazine, some article early mid 2000s, and Dave Grohl and Kurt Cobain had both said that like when they started Nirvana, they wanted to be like the Beatles. And I was like, wait, these guys like the, again, I'm like 12, 13 years old, like these guys like the Beatles too. And then so like I went and listened to their records, specifically Nevermind. That was the first album of theirs I listened to. Because Bleach was before. It was Bleach, Nevermind, and then In Utero, right? Yeah. And I was just like,
what's fantastic is like Bleach. He was a shame. His song, was it about a girl or whatever?
Yeah.
He felt ashamed because he felt like it was too much like a Beatles song, like a Beatles ripoff song. So like, that's what I love about Montage from Heck is you really, and it's also like a perfect. He really was a montage of so many different things and so many different aspects. He didn't come from one angle. Like as much as he, loved them, he also loved, the Mudhoneys and the Melvins and the stuff like that was happening.
And Leadbelly.
Like there was just
David Bowie. Also, what's that? The Man Who Sold the World. They do a great cover of that.
Yeah, I just saw somebody dug up one of the. I follow a Bowie TikTok account, and they talk about how Bowie was bummed that he never even like. This is how I think when we're talking about the hipster viewpoint of Kurt Cobain and kind of the dismissal. I don't think they realize like the level of people who appreciated his genius. Like David Bowie said, "I'm just bummed I never got to have a conversation with him." Like that's Bowie saying that about another artist and not blowing smoke up his ass. Because he talked about how, I believe on the thing that he was talking about is how he loved how straightforward that cover was. And he wanted to know why that song resonated with him out of all the stuff that Bowie ever did. Because, I mean, if you were going to do a David Bowie cover, just say in 1993, 94, that is not one of the first ones you're going to even remotely come to. Like, you're talking Diamond Dogs era, like weirdness when it comes to like that post Ziggy Stardust, but before kind of
before the
Young Americans. Era. Yeah, before the Young Americans and and what we talked about previously.
Right.
But it's a fantastic documentary. I think as much as we wheel out Paul McCartney as he's been our punching bag for this,
Dave Grohl is just as much of a mascot for rock and roll at this point.
But I mean, you don't really see him. He's like, that's somebody who's missing in the documentary. There's a lot of Chris Novoselic because it also talks about, you have to remember Dave Grohl was only in a small part of the history of Nirvana.
Right.
He came in for the Nevermind album after they sacked their one drummer, but like Novoselic has been from
the beginning.
And I'm not diminishing Dave Grohl's like friendship and stuff like that. I'm just saying in the timeline of all
Sure.
of Kurt Cobain's
I
life.
do
He was
I do,
only ever the
however,
last
think
part.
Dave Grohl is up there with Paul McCartney in terms of mascots for the music business at this stage of the game. But I want to end with this before we move on, and if there's anything else you want to say. I mentioned how I read that article and how they wanted to be like the Beatles, and so like that turned me on to listening to their music. Drain You was the song that stood out to me the first time I listened to Nevermind. I was like, I've never heard this before. This is awesome. But I say this to say they were the last band that had an impact similar to the Beatles. They were the last band. I cannot name a band that's come out since Nirvana in 30 years that has made an impact, a footprint that's going to last for forever. They changed fashion. They changed, along with other grunge bands, but like similar to the British Invasion, you attribute it to the Beatles. You know what I mean?
They are the ones who broke the levee, and then the floodgates came. I mean, it's really what
Amen.
I mean. As much as there was a lot of stuff like bubbling underground, they were the focal point of it. And like I said, I think they don't get credit for being more of a punk band than they ever.
That reminds me. So you were talking about the hipster movement. So like, me and my sister Hannah used to make fun of it. Since then, I will say I have bought a few because they had a Beatles T-shirt at Target that I bought a few years ago with the Let It Be album cover. But me and my sister Hannah used to make fun of like people like, everybody wears that same Dark Side of the Moon T-shirt. Everybody wears that same Led Zeppelin 1977 World Tour T-shirt. And I'm not diminishing those T-shirts. They're awesome. But I say this to say, me and my sister, like 10 years ago, I remember we would do bits where we would like kind of like like make fun of those people because like we're ordering band T-shirts from like TeePublic and like the actual like band websites and from concerts and stuff. And it's like, I say all this to say, we live in this era where I know I know somebody that does this. I've mentioned this person before. They own band T-shirts and they've never listened to the bands before. They just think it's a cool shirt. So like with Nirvana, like the yellow smiley face one.
Oh yeah, it's you go to HMM, they're there. You go the just Nirvana logo in yellow. You see variations of it and stuff like that.
And it's great.
One of my favorite TikToks.
Yeah,
one of my favorite TikToks is a little baby wearing a Nirvana shirt.
Yeah,
it's clearly the uncle bought it, and he goes, "Oh, if you're such a fan, name 3 songs." And it's a toddler's not even like 1 yet.
But I say all this to say it's like to drill home your point about how they've kind of been diminished, unfortunately, because of like the hipster movement. I would go as far as to say, so is Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. So is some of these things, because they're so, when you can go to, and again, I buy some of these shirts too myself, but I love these bands. When you can go to Walmart or Target and buy this band T-shirt for $10, it's a weird conversation. It's just a different thing that,
this conversation is a whole can of worms that we could go on and on about.
Yeah. And we will at some point.
Yeah, we will.
But that being said, I think this is the perfect way to end the show in my very selfish opinion. So
it was only going to go one or two ways. It was either going to be Dylan or it was going to be this man.
So, I tell this brief story, and I'll save you most of the spiel. I want to know what you think about this, and then we can end the show or talk about whatever you want to talk about. So again, Rolling Stone magazine, for better or for worse, they've helped me out in multiple situations. In 2010, Bruce Springsteen released The Promise, which was a 2-disc set. All of outtakes from 1977 and 1978, songs that did not make the greatest album ever made, Darkness on the Edge of Town. And I remember reading the article, and my first thought was, didn't he just put out Working on a Dream last year? Because I remember seeing the billboards for it. And I was like, didn't he just put out an album? And that was like my initial thought. And I read the article. And in the article, I was like, wait, this guy, because I didn't know at the time, wait, this guy had all of these songs. That album's only got 10 tracks on it. And at the time, I knew Greetings from Asbury Park, Wild the Innocent and the East Street Shuffle, Born to Run. I knew Badlands and Promised Land. I knew The River, Off the River. I knew like Atlantic City, a couple of tracks off Born in the USA. But like for me at this stage of the point, I had the live 75 through 85 albums, LPs box set that my grandma got me at a garage sale for $1 in 2003. Okay.
Yeah,
I could sell, I could turn around and sell that for $50 now, by the way.
Yeah, if not
So
more.
I was familiar with the Hammersmith, the live at Hammersmith Odeon. We've talked about that concert.
Yep.
That's the Bruce that I knew. So I read this article and was like, I got to find out about this. So HBO released the documentary, The Promise, the making of Darkness on the Edge of Town. And I'd already seen Wings for Wheels, the making of Born to Run. But I watched this, and there are, you know, if I ever become famous or anything and I write an autobiography, there's like 10 musical moments that changed my life. This is one of them. To see this man go through this legal issue with his his royalties for songwriting ownership and his masters and all that. To see this man write all of these great pop songs that would have been top 40 hits, similar to Billy Joel at the time, and was like, that's not what I'm you want to talk about integrity? That's not what I'm going for. I want to go for this tonal piece about what happens if you don't leave your hometown and you ride out your 20s into your 30s, you know, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. Then, so I watched the doc and I was like, I got to go listen to this album, you know, all the way through. And then it was the first time I heard Darkness all the way through. And it was the first time I heard Racing in the Street, which, well, I'd heard the live version, but the album version specifically changed my life. And then, you know, I just remember listening to that album like 3 times over like a month. And I was like so attracted to it, but at the same time, like I didn't get it. I was like, I just, it's so dark and depressing. Like it's this weird thing. And then like, I don't know, maybe like the 4th listen at this stage of the game, I'd gone to the record store, bought this used copy. Actually, I have 2 used copies, old original pressings of the album. Like my 4th listen, maybe a few months after I saw this documentary, it all clicked. And I was like, oh, this is what he was trying to say. This is what he was going for. And again, he talks about it in the documentary, but like it just didn't click. Once it clicked for me, it was automatically like, this is one of the greatest pieces of music, like albums that I've ever heard in my life. Because again, you talk about integrity. For this guy to give away Because the Night to Patti Smith, to give away Fire to the Pointer Sisters, et cetera, to have all these great songs like Ain't Good Enough for You and stuff like that, these great pop songs, top 40 songs that would have made him a millionaire. No bullshit.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah, put Factory on there. That's what we're going for. That's the tone. To me, this is the closest thing sonically to like a Martin Scorsese movie or a Michael Mann film that you could ever listen to, because it's not only that cinematic, but it's that, you know, it's like
tonal. The tone is
tonal,
not.
Yeah. Like it's like when Scorsese's making a movie, like he doesn't care about all the, like, I don't care about that. I want to make something that suits the film, you know?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on any of this?
This I've never seen. This passed me by, and I'm shocked that this is one of those ones that's always been on the list. What year did this come out?
2010.
Yeah, this one was like just snuck past me, where it was one of those I need to see it because, while I am not as big of a Bruce Springsteen fan, I still have my credentials, and we have talked about it.
You absolutely do. Yeah.
Like it's not just so especially with early Bruce. And then I've told you about, like, I need to figure that I'll do this during Christmas. There is a family lore that my Uncle Steve bought a song or sold a song to Springsteen or sold it to a publishing company that Springsteen ended up picking up and playing. I need to find out the lore. I don't believe this story, but it's one of those I need to get the details because I think it would be
I'm so
fascinating regardless
suspicious
of the.
already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm suspicious of it too because my Uncle Steve was a fantastic guitar player before his
Sure.
schizophrenia.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
he went the Sid Barrett route. Like he was fantastic until he could mentally handle it. But so like I'm interested in this because that's one of the things about Springsteen that's more fascinating to me. And this is where you do get your comparisons to you know, Dylan. It kind of sucks that like Springsteen, while he became lauded, he wasn't lauded in the time as much as like
No.
because there was almost for in pop music, and we'll get into this whenever we do our 27-part documentary series, not documentary, but our 20-part series on Bob Dylan. There was almost a Dylan music like industry within the industry
Well, there
where like
was.
people
I
were
mean,
taking, and so there's a lot of that's what the similarities mean when you talk about Because of the Night and sort of those type of things is like you find out that these throwaway songs, these half-written songs by
like
Bob
Wagon
Dylan
Wheel.
are just fantastic. And then Bruce was doing the exact same thing, and I don't think he was doing it in the thought process of Dylan does this, so I must do it. You know what I
No.
mean? Like, it's just it's
Right.
still that thread of like American songwriting.
And I can't.
I always like
Yeah.
those comparisons, the two, like how they're eerily similar but not contrived. You know?
Totally. And I can't say this enough. And I want to hear more about what you think, but like just in general. But for me, an album like this, and this is not a knock against Dylan, it's not a knock against Neil Young, it's not a knock against all these other great, Mount Rushmore level songwriters and artists and talk about integrity and all that sort of stuff. But like Neil's like, yeah, let's plug in and play. Bob's like, okay, we got these backing musicians, let's plug in and play. Where Bruce, again, specific, I mean, for a lot of his albums, starting with Born to Run, but since we're specifically talking about Darkness on the Edge of Town, I wouldn't compare him to any other musician. I would compare him to filmmakers like Martin Scorsese or whoever, pick, Greta Gerwig or whoever you like. Because it's so specific. And you'll see it in the documentary. How does the snare drum sound? What are we trying to get the snare drum to have the audience feel? He described, and I don't want to spoil the doc for you, but I'll tell you this one thing real quick. They were having a hard time mixing it because the sounds in his head and what he was hearing after they recorded all of this, they weren't lining up. And they brought in Chuck Plotkin, who I love. Chuck Plotkin, and he comes in, and he's not a mixer. He was an engineer and producer or whatever. And they brought him in just to kind of get a feel. And they were talking about the song "Prove It All Night," and Bruce said, "What I want the first second of this song to feel like is you're at a picnic with somebody and you're having this beautiful day, and it cuts to a picture of a dead body. That's what I want this to feel like. That da 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 da, like that's the opening notes."
Yeah.
And Chuck Plotkin jived with what Bruce was saying and started mixing it. And then then he used them on pretty much every album after that. And it's like, oh, you're going for something that exceeds what Dylan was doing in the studio and Neil, and you're going for something. This is on a whole nother level. This isn't songwriting. This is like a tonal piece, So
yeah. So I'm interested to go back to this because, like I said, you and I talked about there's parts of Springsteen where I dip in and out of interest in his stuff, and this is around the era where I probably would have been more interested in the stuff he's doing. Like I said, I go for the weird stuff. Like I said, when we're talking about Bowie, my favorite period is the Berlin period, the trilogy. I mean, and those are fucking weird ass songs compared to what you're used to when it comes to Bowie.
If you grew up listening to Rebel and China Girl and
that sort of stuff. So, solid pick. Of course, like again, there was only one of two ways this is going to end. It was either going to end with you and Dylan, or if it's going to be Springsteen. And I had a good bet that it was going to be Springsteen. And this is one of the ones I really need to like go back.
And it's
to
only an hour for all
Yeah.
of you out there. Maybe an hour and 10 minutes. It's not that long.
So, all right. Well, we made it at 2 hours. Oh my gosh. Oh my
How
gosh.
excited are you for 2024? Just the episodes we've come up with tonight.
I think this is true. This is one of the things where we're like what do we say? Because I'm not kidding. I don't even keep a list anymore because
We don't need one.
we don't need one. But I am excited that we got to do this finally after we discussed it. I think our discussions are always fantastic. That's just me being selfish. That's why I was like, I care less 2 people watch this. You know, we enjoy this.
I had an energy drink, and I'm just like loving the conversation. I'm so interested to watch that Bowie documentary at some point and the Kurt Cobain one. 100%.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Like, and I am unlike you, no energy drink. I'm pretty drained right now. But I will say this. As much as long as it took it this way, we are making and I'm going to say this here now, I'm going to make a commitment to start doing more of these. I think especially, I want to say from July onward, I think life kind of got in our way most of the times.
Yeah.
And
it will. It happens.
Yeah, it happens. But I think especially with 2024 and what we have, I believe the next one we have planned is an in-person one that we've talked about. And we haven't really fully came up with it, but we have an idea.
So Delacommons going to come to my studio, and he's going to bring a box of records with him, and this will be great because we'll get the wide shot of the studio. And hopefully Helen will be available. We got to remember to start a group chat and make sure she takes off work that day or whatever day we decide. And I think we're just going to talk about we're just going to talk about records. Our albums we think people should own or give a listen to if they're not going to go buy vinyl, because why would we ask you to buy vinyl? They're expensive. And I think we can
talk about buying vinyl.
Sure. Yeah, same. Long time ago. I think we can talk about, our first vinyl records. I'd love for you to bring some of the first vinyl records you ever owned over.
Yeah, a lot of them are going to be like reissues of stuff because
that's fine. I have
destroyed the other ones.
I have all original pressings of everything I got. But yes,
spoiler alert, this is one of them.
Zeppelin 4. I got that album. But yeah, it's the only Led Zeppelin album I own.
Definitely excited for that. It was kind of funny. We were doing our after we just got done. Also, if you haven't, what was it, last week we did our Empire Records watch along, and then afterwards.
Yeah.
Afterwards, we were kind of hanging out back in the backstage thing, and we were just talking for like another hour or so. And I kept popping up records and just seeing Rob's reaction. Look, the people were talking about something completely unrelated, and I just tried to goat Rob into saying which ones it could be.
Again, I know covers. I know, Leon Russell. I know album covers and VHS covers. I just know it's just like ingrained in my DNA. So I get super excited.
I mean, and also, once again, I can't hate Metallica too much because I have.
Okay, that album cover I recognize. What's the other album?
This is
I know that one too.
This is Kill 'Em All. This is their first album.
That's their first album. Are there any hits on that I would know?
Seek and Destroy is kind of the big one on it.
Okay, I do know that. As you can tell, Delacommons definitely way more into rap and hip hop, i.e., the rap hip hop series, than I am. But I think neither one of us are really that into metal. So
no, that's not true.
Is that true?
It is. That's a very interesting and long story. I was huge into metal until I discovered punk. So probably from age 6 through actually the big through line when I was talking about my Uncle David, and yeah, he was into grunge, but he was also the biggest Metallica fan that I ever met in my life. So metal like Pantera, I mean, we're talking hard like Pantera, Cannibal Corpse, Napalm Death. Like I could go on and on and on about these metal bands, but towards the new metal kind of that happened, I completely checked out and I haven't gone back. So I have a very complicated history. I do know a lot of early metal, especially in the 80s. Your Judas Priest, your Iron Maidens, your that sort of stuff. Like I do have a vast knowledge of that, but it's not something I it's not part of me anymore. It's very, I wonder, like, that'd be a fascinating discussion if we go to it, if I could figure out why that core part of my being growing up, like, you talked about the Nirvana shirts. In elementary school, my friend Kevin was the one who wore the Nirvana. I was wearing the Metallica t-shirt. So that's where I was at
So you
as a kid.
guys were halfway to Beavis and Butthead, but
Yeah, we always
you
joked about that.
decided
We
to
just
go
needed
with
somebody,
Nirvana instead of AC/DC. So yes,
and our friend had a Winger shirt. We didn't have a friend who wore a Winger shirt. So
right.
yeah. So I'm definitely excited for what we have coming up. Like I said, I think we're going to make more of a commitment to get these going, because you and I just, once again, we talk outside of the show, and we end up getting the fucking music discussions. We're like, why haven't we put this on the show? Like,
no bullshit. One of the watch alongs, because Characters of Culture, it's gotten to the point where like everybody just knows to text me towards the end of the show, and then they come backstage and we all just hang out afterwards, like an after party.
Yeah.
But yeah, we started having a conversation. I'm like, why are we not live right now having this conversation? This is great.
Well, was that my Molotov cocktail bomb that I threw about James Gunn's soundtrack being overrated?
I think so.
And then that was actually Ryan White, friend. Else. He goes, "Why are we not why are we not recording this?" Wait, what? This is far more fascinating than anything you said on the Fincher stuff. Like, so.
All right, so that being said, we're gonna wrap things up. Thank you guys for joining us. We're gonna do plugs here in a second, but thank you guys for joining us for season 2 of EMBC, because I go by year. So we will be starting 2024 with season 3 of EMBC. It's gonna be our best year yet. Same with season 4 of Characters of Culture. Really excited about that. Join us tomorrow night. We are doing a watch along. Lego has been saying this for a while, that she keeps picking movies and she feels like eventually she's not going to be allowed to pick the movies anymore because they get weirder and weirder with time. We are not I've not seen the first one, but apparently I'm going to watch the second one tomorrow night. I don't need to see the first one. We are watching Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 tomorrow, because a combination of holidays and horror. We could have gone with a normal movie like Black Christmas, but hey, to each their own.
It's Lego. You ain't getting away that easy.
I've been seeing, she's texted me multiple times with these garbage day memes. So apparently there's going to be some sort of garbage day thing happening in this movie tomorrow. But anyways, so join us for that. And then, the RFN's out for the year. We'll be coming back mid-January, because I need till about January 8th to do my top 20 list for movies of 2023. It's neither here nor there. But we will be coming back mid-January. I don't know if we're going to start the year with the fundraiser or do that the third week of January. I gotta talk to all my people. I know me and Lego will be hosting the show, and everybody will be kind of coming in and out that night, or whoever wants to hang around. But that'll be our RFN anniversary show, our best of 2023 show combo, along with our RFN fundraiser for StreamYards. I don't have a Patreon. My Discord is free for those of us that use it. That though it's gotten to the point where it's so inside baseball, I feel bad for the new people that join it, but they're welcome to it. We don't ask for donations on these programs or anything, but the one time a year in January, because I don't want my bank account to charge me come February 1st for the large amount of money that it costs to run StreamYards. So we will be doing a fundraiser again here in January. It was very successful last year. I can't thank the donors enough. You guys were able to put in about half the money that it costs to buy the year package. So we're actually going to be more than likely downgrading from HD and just going back to standard def, because it is cheaper. But it depends on how much money we raise. So again, I'm not good at asking for things, but if you guys can show up, and we'll promote it and plug it and all that sort of stuff leading up to it. But if you guys can help out, any dollar counts. So really do appreciate that. That's my spiel on kind of the next month of programs. If you want to find out what Sir Joker is up to, you can, reach out to him on social media. I know he's planning some mental health miniseries this coming year. But that being said, Delacommon, what do you got going on? Where can the people find you? Any last thoughts and comments?
I can't say enough about kind of like, we don't ever plug trying to hustle money out of this. Like this, none of our stuff that we do. I'm sorry, we'll end up doing an hour. We did like once again, we did Tom Petty first 5 albums. We're not really looking to get that monetary money from YouTube. So the one time a year that we do like say, hey, can you kick a few bucks our way? It's really important because one of the great things about this channel is we kind of, it's so diverse. There's not really, I mean, we have,
I like it that way. I like the diversity.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about behind the scenes, we talk about kind of like the mission statement and kind of the philosophy behind the RFN. And so I definitely will be a part of that. As for 2024, I'm hoping is a big year for me. I'm going to start doing more streaming on both Twitch and YouTube over on my channel. I'm looking to do, I've got ideas and I'm building and I've got some weird shit. And if you see kind of the marginal work that I put into like the EMBC, like graphics and that sort of
It's
stuff.
great. The Fincher show was great with all your clips too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm looking to do something different. And it's not one of those, I want to do something that's better or worse. I want to do something different and fun and kind of want to create the channel that I've always wanted to see. So that's the mission statement there. And of course, we'll be doing stuff on the RFN. You do need to add me to the friends of RFN. I noticed on the YouTube.
You're not on there? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. It's something that's never been brought up and never, like, once again, we never thought of. But the other day I was looking, I was like, wait, I'm not even on there.
I'm gonna
fine. There's nothing on my channel right now, really.
I want to make a group chat and just be like, anybody that wants anything changed or whatever, just put it in here. Cause like there's some credits I gotta change for Joker shows. There's a bunch of stuff, boring stuff I gotta do on the computer. I could probably take just one day. I just sit down and do it all. But yes, I will add you to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying not to say like there's going to be hopefully a lot of stuff, and I have already tried to book up January as much as possible. If you also, this goes into the plugs. Follow me on Instagram is the main place to get to me. Della Common. That will also link you to my personal one, even though my personal one is my photography. I'm taking that to a whole new level. I've already booked 3 sessions with people, like my favorite creative people. So I'm really starting to get back on that horse because I felt like my momentum died at the end of the year, like midway through the year.
I want to come out to you in the springtime and do a photo shoot once I'm back in like good shape again, physical shape. So
yeah, I mean, one of these days I need to also like just come to one of your shows and like take pictures that you maybe you use for promotional stuff for the music stuff. So a lot of exciting stuff about that. I'm very optimistic about this year. Even though it's ending the year with this.
You got to go in with the bar low, though, because what the last few years has taught us is if you go into the year with high expectations, you're bound to be disappointed.
This is true. But I want high expectations for myself.
I know.
The rest of the world, it's the lowest bar it's ever been. So,
sure. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, exciting stuff. Find me on there. Also, just a quick plug. I don't ever really plug them, but I always plug the RFN whenever I'm on there. My friend runs a D&D Twitch channel called Distal's Place. Fantastic. Thursday nights, usually every other Thursday, we do this tavern. It is mass fucking chaos. It is crazy. It's fun. It's lewd. Okay. But we're still in TOS. Like, we're not too crazy. I call us like wholesomely lewd. Fun times. I'm going to be doing a lot of work with them, especially once PAX comes around. I think in March. I'm going to Boston for PAX. So if you're into gaming, if you're into tabletop, if in that sort of stuff, check out Distal's Place. It's a great community and a great, he's a good friend, and he kind of has the same ethos about building community and kind of building a better representation online, which is, I think, coincides with what we do here on the RFN. So yeah, check them out.
And I say this to myself all the time. Like I could not be more proud that of what I have created here, because I go into Discord once in a while and I just see the in-depth conversations that people are having, and I'm like,
we have it out too. We have it out.
Yeah, we do have it. We do.
Yeah, we have it out, but it's not malicious.
Exactly. But like I sit back sometimes and I go, all right, don't get too cocky, Rob, but look at what you built. Like, you made this. I built a playground and kind of hand selected some people, and other people came, and I was like, here's a playground. Let's play in it, everybody. And we've had it now for 3 years. And that's, like I said, could not be happier and more thrilled. And I'm glad that everybody's got a place they can go to talk about everything from politics to music to fashion, everything else that we do in the Discord and here on the channel. And I will say this, I love feedback. So if you're still watching this program or you catch us on the replay, and I'm going to start saying this more at the end of our shows, put in the comments, what do you like about these shows? What do you not like about these shows? Does Rob talk too much? I know I do, but put it in the comments and let us know. Because I just want to continue to expand and diversify and make this channel more unique and have more content and better content and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes less is more. So we used to do a lot more shows. We do less shows now, but better content. So we're learning as we go, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, like I said, this is not a money grab. We're not trying to be. Nobody's going to be Mr. Beast or any of those clowns on this channel.
We don't make any money. So all the donations go right into the StreamYards fund and into the Lego. We use this website Pixlr. It's like $20 a year for Lego to make the thumbnails for Characters of Culture. So that's what it goes towards. It's not, Rob's not making any money off of this. Neither is anybody else. So, and to quote Mo, this was a running joke all of 2021, when are we going to get paid? Nobody's getting paid. So we'll end it with that. But yeah, hope you guys all have a happy holiday and a great new year. And we'll be back in 2024. Any last words there, Del Common?
Nope, you summed it up perfectly.
All right, take it easy, everybody.